I walked away after she demanded out, rebuilt a life of peace in a hidden cabin, found someone who believed in me, and left her stunned by my freedom. You overcooked the carrots again, she said, not looking up from her phone. Alan stood at the counter, carving knife in one hand, the roast chicken steaming on the cutting board in front of him. He sliced through it with slow, precise strokes, like a man who respected the blade more than the bird. He didn't say anything. He just placed a crisp thigh onto her plate, added a spoonful of potatoes, then the overcooked carrots, and set the plate in front of her. Janet didn't touch the food. Instead, she put her phone down like it was an anchor and folded her hands. I want out. Alan blinked once, not fast, one slow, deliberate blink like a machine rebooting. I'm done, she added, as if clarification was necessary. He didn't sit down, he just kept slicing. Okay, he said. A beat of silence. The only sound was the faint tick of the clock over the fireplace and the blade whispering against the wooden board. She narrowed her eyes. That's it? Alan nodded toward her plate. Eat while it's hot. No reaction, no questions. You're just going to… what? Pretend like it doesn't matter? He finally looked at her, calm and steady. I'll sign the papers tomorrow. That wasn't what she expected, not from the man she'd spent nearly 3 decades tethered to. Alan wasn't flashy, wasn't loud, but he wasn't passive either. He was the guy who once debated store-brand versus name-brand ketchup for a full month. The guy who read manuals before buying anything. The guy who took 2 days to decide whether to plant a pine or a cedar in the front yard. And here she was telling him she wanted a divorce, and he was slicing chicken like she'd just mentioned they were out of salt. I already talked to a lawyer, she added, trying to poke the bear. I've got everything outlined. I'm being fair. He gave her a tight, polite smile. Good for you. That hit wrong. Not because it was mean, but because it wasn't. There was no sarcasm, no bite. Just bland, disconnected civility, like she was a neighbor complaining about leaves in her yard and he was agreeing to rake. She shifted in her chair. You're not even going to ask why. He paused mid-slice. Does it matter? It should. He glanced down at the breast meat, then back up. Does it change your decision? No, but… Then it doesn't matter. That was when she realized he wasn't trying to win her back. He wasn't bargaining. He wasn't frozen. He wasn't even hurt. He was ready. And that unsettled her more than any fight ever could. Janet picked up her fork and stabbed a carrot, chewing it like it had insulted her. Alan finally sat down across from her, poured himself half a glass of wine, and didn't offer her any. You really don't care, she muttered, half to herself. He shrugged. I did. For a long time. Another pause. Another slice, this time on his own plate. And then he smiled. One of those tight-lipped, eyes-don't-join-in smiles that people give when they've already packed the last box in their head. Now I care about peace. She scoffed. Peace? That's rich. You've been angry since 1998. He nodded. And I'm tired of it, so congratulations. You're free. Janet searched his face for something. Resentment, pain, even a flicker of humiliation. Anything. But he was serene. Unbothered, like a monk who'd just finished burning his old life and welcomed the ash. I'll be staying at the house, she said, just to fill the air. You can find someplace else. He stood, took both plates, even hers, though she hadn't finished, and carried them to the sink. Don't worry, he said. I've got a place in mind. And with that, Alan turned on the faucet, rinsed his hands and dried them with the towel she'd crocheted herself 15 years ago. Janet sat alone at the table. Wine untouched, a half-eaten carrot cooling next to her knife. And for the first time since she'd rehearsed that line, I want out, she felt something she hadn't planned for. Doubt. So he just nodded. Kim leaned in, wine glass dangling from her fingers like a loose tooth. Didn't blink, Janet said, swirling her Merlot. Didn't protest. Just said, I'll sign tomorrow. Like I was offering him a new phone plan. The whole table cracked up. They were at Michelle's place. Thursday night, girls only. Red wine flowing like it was bleeding out of someone. The kitchen smelled of overpriced candles and passive-aggressive Pinterest recipes. Janet had just told the story, her version, for the 3rd time. God, he's so Alan, Leia said, rolling her eyes, silent and moody. I swear that man could watch a house burn down and ask if the neighbors needed a rake. More laughter, clinks of glasses. Janet smiled, but it didn't quite reach her jaw. She topped off her drink. I thought maybe he'd break down. Or at least, I don't know. Ask if we could talk. You were married for what, 27 years, Michelle said. You deserve some kind of scene, right? Janet laughed. But no. He just walked to the sink, took my plate like it was Tuesday. Well, Kim said, lifting her glass in a mock toast. Congrats. You're free. No more grumpy trail ranger mumbling about elk patterns and stacking firewood like he's prepping for war. Janet clinked her glass half-heartedly. Yeah. Freedom. But she didn't like how that word tasted tonight. Then Michelle said it, offhand and unbothered. Oh, by the way, Terry saw him at that hardware store near Riverbend. You know, the one with the elk statue out front. Janet paused. When? 2 days ago, I think. She said he looked, quote, shockingly refreshed. Said he was buying a bunch of wood sealant and a new axe. And get this, he wasn't alone. Wait, what do you mean not alone? Janet tried to sound casual, but her grip tightened on the stem of her glass. Terry didn't recognize the woman. Tall, dark hair, maybe mid-40s. But get this, he smiled at her. Smiled Janet. The table went quiet for a second. Leia let out a dramatic gasp. Is Alan having a post-divorce glow-up? Impossible, Kim muttered, laughing nervously. He wore the same hoodie from 2009 till last month. Janet sat still, her cheeks a little warmer than they should have been. She gave a short laugh, shrugged. Probably just some clerk, or a forest intern. Maybe, Michelle said, raising an eyebrow. But Terry said they looked close. Later that night, Janet sat in bed with her laptop open, wine glass empty on the nightstand. She hadn't thought about Alan since the night she walked away. Not really. He'd always been quiet, sure, but boring, predictable. Meatloaf on Mondays, NPR on the drive. Saturday night spent polishing boots that hadn't touched dirt in years. So why did it bother her now? She typed his name into Facebook. Nothing had changed. Same profile photo from 2 years ago. A pine tree he'd taken during a hike. No posts, no updates, just a slow trickle of likes from old ranger buddies and a status that read, retired, still climbing. She clicked over to Instagram. Nothing recent from him, but someone had tagged him. A public post. A blurry photo from a scenic overlook, Alan in the background, lifting a beam of wood over his shoulder. His arms looked stronger than she remembered, and next to him, a woman facing away, holding a measuring tape. Janet zoomed in. The caption read, Cabin Progress with the legend himself. Hashtag Mountain Build White Smoke Season. The account belonged to Grace Landjoy. Her heart thumped. Grace. Her cousin Grace. The one who always called Alan solid. The one who'd stayed behind after last Christmas to help him do the dishes when everyone else went to the bar. Janet closed the tab. Suddenly the room felt too quiet and the wine too bitter. The morning after Janet's little wine night meltdown, the house was already half empty and she hadn't even noticed. Alan was gone before the sky turned blue. He moved like a man with a mission, but no audience, no bags, no duffels. Just a canvas roll tied tight with rope. Inside, a worn axe with his initials burned into the handle, his old hunting rifle wrapped in oilcloth, and a dented Folgers coffee can packed with rolled 20s and faded receipts folded like origami from another life. He didn't leave from the front. Too theatrical. He went out the back door, past the wind chimes she'd bought on impulse from a roadside antique shop, the same wind chimes he'd hated. They didn't make a sound as he passed. He opened the garage, stepped over the cracked tile he'd never got around to fixing, and walked to the old truck with pine needles still wedged in the hood creases. He'd left a note on the kitchen table before leaving. 3 words. Black ink, no flourish, no name, just peace. No goodbye, no I'll miss you, no forwarding address, just calm surgical detachment. Janet found the note 2 hours later, still in her robe. She thought maybe he'd gone to the store, or taken one of those brooding man walks he used to take when work stressed him out. But then she noticed the boots were gone. The heavy pair he kept polished, even when they hadn't been worn. The key hook by the door, his side empty. The safe in the closet stood wide open, documents gone. The sidearm he never actually used, gone. And something else. Not the family portrait, that one stayed in the hallway with its 4 frozen smiles. No. The photo he'd taken himself 2 decades ago. Standing by a frozen lake with a thermos in one hand and a snow-covered pine at his back. That one had always sat in the study. Now there was just dust where the frame used to be. Janet stared at the empty spot for a long time. Then she noticed the silence. No kettle whistling. No deliberate footsteps in the hallway. No crinkle of newspaper open too wide. Even the damn wind chimes were still. She wandered the house in slow, involuntary circuits, not looking for him, at least that's what she told herself, but checking, confirming. The laundry he always folded perfectly, not on the chair. Slippers gone. His scent, cedar, tobacco, Old Spice, already fading. Even the dog's bed was gone. That one made her pause. She walked to the garage, empty space where the truck used to be, a clean patch on the floor like it had never belonged there. She stood gripping the note, just peace. And for the first time since she'd declared she was done, the word didn't sit right. It echoed too much in a house that suddenly felt cavernous, stripped of air. That evening she wandered into the den and sat in his old recliner, the one she'd hated, called ugly, worn leather scratched on the side. It still held his shape, still made that cranky whistle when it leaned back. She sat there until the light faded, and then in the dark. She didn't cry. But for a long time she didn't move either. Because for the first time she realized he hadn't just left. He had disappeared, and she didn't know where to find him. It started as background noise, a comment in the church parking lot after Sunday service. Janet was adjusting her sunglasses when Margie Patterson leaned in with that conspiratorial tone she reserved for gossip dressed as concern. "I think I saw Alan yesterday." Janet blinked. "Alan?" "Yes, you're Alan. Well, ex-Alan, I suppose. He was at that trailhead up past Canyon Bluff, the one where the ranger station burned down years ago." Janet forced a smirk. "He's probably just pretending to be off-grid again. You know how he loves playing pioneer." Margie laughed a little too long. "Well, he wasn't alone. Tall brunette. Not young, not old. Looked capable." She said the word like it was scandalous. You know, the type who'd split firewood in heels and still make stew from scratch. Janet's mouth went dry. She waved a hand like swatting a fly. "Alan's allergic to capable. He can't even boil eggs without a guidebook." Margie chuckled, squeezed her arm, and walked away. But the image had already sunk in like a nail in soft wood, a woman on his trail. By Tuesday, she was back at work, trying to ignore how her phone screen called to her. She kept flipping it face down, then flipping it back over again like waiting for a sign. Instead, she got Martha Blanche from yoga sliding into her inbox, saw Alan at the co-op in Fairbrook. Looked great, apparently rented land upstate, building something rustic. Janet deleted the message, then undeleted it, then stared. Building something. Alan never built anything. He fixed, repaired, maintained, patch jobs and duct tape, not dreams and lumber. But rustic. That sounded like him. Or worse, someone reinventing him. The next day she cracked and called Grace. Voicemail. She sent a casual text instead. "Hey, miss you. Let's catch up sometime." Nothing for hours. Then at 8:12 p.m., her screen lit up. "Grace, I ran into Alan today." That was it. No emoji, no follow-up. Just that flat little grenade. Janet's stomach knotted. "Where?" She texted back, trying to mask nerves behind punctuation. No reply. 3 dots appeared, vanished, reappeared, then nothing. She called, straight to voicemail. For the next hour, Janet circled her living room like a trapped animal. Every creak in the house made her turn. She kept glancing at the photo frames with Grace in them. Thanksgiving 2009, that Yellowstone trip where Alan got altitude sickness and Grace sat by his side in the ER reading headlines to distract him. She'd always been the nice cousin, neutral territory. Now her name felt like a trigger. Janet sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing harder than the night she told him she was leaving. Why Grace? Why now? Was it sympathy rebound, or had there always been something she'd missed? She didn't plan to stalk him. Not at first. But by the second week of seeing Grace's name pop up in shared tags, then disappear just as quickly, and hearing yet another person say Alan looked good, the restraint cracked. Janet called in sick Thursday, said it was migraines, sounded convincing enough that her assistant offered soup. What she didn't say was that she'd printed the county land registry that morning and spent an hour scanning for the name Rivers in 2 rural zip codes Grace once posted about. She found it, a 6-acre parcel off a dirt road, registered to Alan B. Rivers, purchased 3 weeks after she handed him the divorce papers. No real address, just coordinates. She typed them into her GPS. No cell coverage the last 30 minutes of the drive. Trees closing in on both sides like the forest remembered her. By the time she turned onto the gravel access path, she already hated how careful the tire marks looked. Not careless mud rut chaos, maintained. like someone gave a damn about more than survival. The trees parted just enough to reveal it. A cabin. Not the weekend rental kind. Real. Hand-built logs, wide windows, a porch with actual planters growing something green and alive. The chimney puffed a thin stream of smoke, like a sigh. The scent of pine and firewood drifted on the breeze. She didn't step out of the car at first. She sat frozen, staring at a world she'd never seen. Lights on inside, warm yellow, soft. Not the harsh overheads Alan used to complain about in their old kitchen. Movement. The door creaked open. Grace stepped out first, hair tied back, sleeves rolled, holding what looked like a pan of cornbread or cobbler. And behind her, Alan, smiling. A real smile, the kind that showed teeth. She hadn't seen that expression in years. Grace turned to him, said something. He laughed, not a chuckle, a laugh. In that instant, Janet felt the porch light of her old life flicker off. She finally opened the car door. Boots crunched on gravel. Grace looked up first, brow furrowing. Alan followed. He didn't look surprised, not angry, not shocked, just unsurprised. Like this too had been accounted for. Grace said something quiet. Alan gave a slight shake of his head. Janet stood at the edge of the clearing like a trespasser. "You built this," she said. It came out flat, rehearsed. Her voice didn't match the trembling in her legs. Alan nodded once, piece by piece. Grace stepped back inside without a word, as if this scene needed fewer witnesses. Janet looked around again. The cabin, the trees, the neat wood pile, the woven hammock swaying in the breeze, the kind of life Alan never had time for before, the kind she never imagined he wanted. Or maybe she just never bothered to ask. She forced a weak smile. "It's nice. I didn't know you could do all this." Alan leaned against the porch beam, arms crossed. "You never asked what I could do without you." There was no venom in it. That was what stung most. He hadn't said it to hurt her. He said it because it was simply true. And somewhere inside, Janet felt a small, irreparable crack. Janet stared at the blinking cursor for 20 minutes before typing a single word. She'd written 3 drafts. 1. Cool and formal, I hope you're well. I'd like to clear the air. 2. Veiled concern, just want to make sure you're okay. 3. Nostalgic manipulation. After all these years, don't we owe each other a talk? They all felt thin. In the end, she kept it simple. Subject, hey, body, we should talk. I think it would help with closure. Let me know. She hit send, and immediately regretted it. Not because it sounded desperate, it didn't, on the surface, but because of the emptiness that followed. She refreshed her inbox 12 times that night. Nothing. By the second day, the silence twisted into something meaner. She found herself pacing the kitchen, opening drawers she hadn't touched in months, staring at 3 unopened cans of Alan's favorite chili and wondering why she still had them. Then at 4:17 p.m., the response came. Subject, hey, body, nothing to close. You made it clear. 7 words. 7 surgical, clean-cut, unemotional words. She stared so long the text blurred. No warmth. No jab. Just a mirror turned to her face. No invitation, no maybe sometime, not even passive-aggressive punctuation, just finality wrapped in restraint. She closed the laptop and walked into the living room where the late sunlight cut through the window at an angle that used to feel comforting. Now it just made the dust glow. She sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand, waiting for something that wouldn't come. It wasn't the rejection. It was the realization she had no more levers, no more strings. For years, Alan had been the steady satellite orbiting her chaos, reliable, predictable, emotionally cautious, easy to provoke. And now he was still, and gone. She tried calling Grace. No answer. Texted, hey, just wondering how you're doing. Nothing. No dots, no read receipts. She scrolled Grace's Instagram again. New post, a wooden bench facing a sunset. Caption, some things don't need closure, they just need peace. Janet felt her chest tighten. Was that about her? She typed a longer message to Alan, apologizing, hinting, grasping, then deleted it. Instead, she opened their old shared drive, mortgage records, family photos, scanned recipes he'd archived in the early 2000s like a paranoid librarian. She clicked a random folder, 1998 trip Yellowstone. A photo, Alan in front of a pine tree, arms crossed, sun in his eyes. She remembered being annoyed that day, complaining about bugs, spending more time on the payphone with a college friend than watching the sunset with her husband. Now the memory wasn't nostalgic, it was indicting. She leaned back and stared at the ceiling. It was the first time in her adult life she realized what it meant to have no say. He hadn't blocked her. He hadn't yelled. He simply opted out. And that was worse than rage, worse than tears. It was a message written in silence. You are no longer a factor in my world. The bottle of wine rolled once in the passenger seat before settling against her purse. A deep red, the kind Alan used to say gave him headaches. She chose it deliberately. To signal, "See, I still remember." She'd spent 2 days crafting the right moment. Told coworkers she was going on a solo reset weekend. Even packed an overnight bag in case it went well. Whatever well meant now. The road narrowed. Gravel turned to packed dirt, then barely more than tire marks clawed into earth. Pines loomed. Her phone signal died 15 minutes ago. She didn't care. Or maybe she did. Maybe she wanted no backup, no rescue, just her and the consequences. The cabin came into view. Larger now, rooted. Planters overflowing with thyme and lavender, fresh stain gleaming on the logs, wood piles stacked with obsessive precision. She parked crooked, grabbed the wine, no bag, no coat, just the bottle and her carefully arranged smile. She walked up the steps slower than intended, heels catching in the worn wood, pulse tapping at her neck. She knocked twice, firm but not aggressive. Silence. She raised her hand again, then froze. A voice, calm, clear, familiar. "Come in." 2 words. No surprise, no who is it, just permission. It rattled her more than yelling would have. She hesitated, smoothed her blouse, turned the handle. The door swung open with a whisper. Warmth hit first, thick, earthy. Firewood, rosemary, something baking. Her eyes adjusted to amber light. Alan stood at the counter, sleeves rolled, freshly shaven. Deliberate, presentable. Not the old scruff he'd worn like protest. Grace was pouring wine into 2 glasses with that same calm smile she wore at weddings and baby showers. The one Janet used to find harmless. Boring even. Now it looked like the calm before a storm she hadn't seen coming. Janet's breath caught like a bone in her throat. The bottle in her hand tilted. Grace noticed her first, quiet recognition like finding an old postcard from a place already visited. Alan didn't rush to greet her. He just raised an eyebrow. Still, what is she doing here? Janet's voice cracked. Grace set the bottle down gently. "Helping," she said, polite as ever. "Helping Alan rebuild." Alan lifted a glass, swirled it once. "You're living here?" Janet asked, brittle. He nodded. "We built it together." "We," Grace added softly. "Every beam, every tile. Even stained the window frames twice because the first coat wasn't quiet enough." She said it with a small laugh, measured, like she'd saved the line for this exact moment. Janet's fingers curled tighter around her unopened bottle. "Is this some kind of retaliation?" she asked Alan. He blinked slowly. "No, Janet. I'm not here to stop pretending I didn't have better options." The air left the room. Grace handed him the second glass. Alan turned to Janet. "But I'm here to stop pretending I didn't have better options." Janet took a stumbling step back, then forward again. "You and Grace." Grace took a sip. "I believed in him," she said calmly. "Long before you stopped." Janet didn't remember setting the bottle down, but it was on the table now. Her hands empty, like everything else. "I never meant to break him," she whispered. Alan's gaze didn't soften. "No," he said. "You just never cared enough to notice when the pieces stopped fitting." Grace stepped forward, face soft but unwavering. "You thought the house made him small, Janet. You never realized it was you doing the shrinking." Janet glanced at Alan, begging for a flicker of sympathy, of history, of us. He lifted his glass slightly toward her. "To peace," he said. 2 words. Sincere. The floor dropped out. Because he wasn't performing, he was living. Janet's arms fell to her sides. The sting behind her eyes wasn't anger, it was hollow realization. She looked at the hand-built chair in the corner, sturdy, simple. It reminded her of the man she used to live with, the one she assumed would wait, who always waited through slammed doors, silent dinners, birthdays where she introduced him as just Alan. Her eyes landed on the windowsill, a small ceramic owl he'd bought at a flea market. Ugly thing she'd once mocked. Now it stood proudly among potted herbs, unapologetically his. "You moved on with her," she said, voice cracking between accusation and disbelief. Alan gave a half shrug, almost casual. "You left," he said simply. She didn't. The words sat like a stone dropped into water, small, quiet, impossibly heavy. Grace's face stayed calm. I always believed in him, even when you rolled your eyes at every idea he had. Even when you called his cabin dreams childish. Janet clenched her jaw. You think you know him? You were background. Grace didn't flinch. Backgrounds notice what the spotlight doesn't. Alan still hadn't moved. Not toward her, not away. Janet turned sharply, walked to the door. Heels striking hardwood with humiliated speed. She gripped the knob. One last time, Alan's voice, calm, final. You said you were done, he said, almost kindly. She froze. Turns out, he added, so was I. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was absolute. Janet stood with her hand on the knob, staring at the grain in the door like it might rewrite the last 20 minutes if she looked hard enough. But nothing changed. No one called her back. No one softened. And that was when she knew, the grip she thought she'd held all those years, on him, on the narrative, on the ending, was gone. He didn't hate her. He didn't need to. Because he was free. She stepped out into the cold, closing the door behind her. It didn't creak. It clicked shut,